Taylor and I are here tonight to share with you some information on some of the facilities, logistics and details that have been put forward by the task force members and have the opportunity to present some of our research and findings of how to complete some of those plans. Superintendent Ellis, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add?
Absolutely. Our staff has put a great deal of time into what you had asked of us at one of the last meetings, and that was to bring construction proposals back to you. So we have 3 different scenarios to bring to you tonight. I would also recognize members of MOLD are actually with us, and Tom Moronic, our facilities manager, should we have questions about any particular proposal or things that the board would want to talk about from the architectural side of things. So thanks for being here tonight, gentlemen. Appreciate that. And with that,
Wonderful. All right, so our plan tonight is to go through some of the Southern enrollment considerations that we've been reviewing so far as they relate to the community task force proposals, looking at some of the additional project considerations that have been brought forward over the past couple of years, and then finally, Ellis will wrap up tonight doing a financial tax impact information feedback for you too. As we've been going through our process, these are some of the priorities that we have put in place as we're making these district-wide decisions for all of the different proposals that you'll see coming forward. So one is to align grade spans as much as possible throughout the district. Understanding Zimmerman's a little bit isolated because of their building structure of how they're out there right now. Maintaining our class size promise to our communities, keeping our taxes as affordable as possible, including a plan for setting forward programming and facilities, and long-range facility solutions that make the most sense to solve some of our capacity concerns in the longest range possible. So first of all, we thought we'd give a little context to how some of this has been done in the past. Previously, as we were unified with one high school in the district, that was Elk River High School, around the 1999-2000 year, that high school was actually reaching its capacity as well. So similar to where we are within the Rogers community right now, they're actually getting to the point of about 1,900 students. And looking at what that building capacity was going to look like as it moved forward. That resulted then in a referendum that took place in the fall of 2000, which included many different things that you can see there, but specifically the new Rogers High School, and in addition to what was then Zimmerman Junior High, became Zimmerman Middle School High School at the completion of that project. So just to give you an idea of what that looked like at the time that we implemented those changes. So you can see the line on the very top is Elk River High School, starting with around that 1999 year. The dark blue line is our Rogers High School enrollment, and the lighter blue line is Zimmerman High School. So at the time that the Elk River High School was reaching that capacity, at that point, that high school was only a 10 through 12 high school. Part of the plan as they opened up Rogers High School and Zimmerman Middle School High School was to transition all 3 of the high schools into a 9 through 12 model. So you can see in 2005, there's a note that says that was the first year that all of the buildings had their new full classes in that 9 through 12 model. From that point where, from the left, leading up to that 2005 moment, you'll notice that some of those capacities grew pretty drastically at Rogers High School and Zimmerman High School. The reason for that was at the time that we rolled out the new buildings, students who were sophomores and juniors at Elk River High School were given the option to remain at Elk River High School for the duration of their schooling years, the first then full classes being in the new model in that 2005 year. Then you can see as the enrollment trends progressed along, we can see the Rogers High School growing pretty rapidly till about the 2015 mark. At that point, we did a referendum in 2016 that added an addition, third wing addition under Rogers High School, which increased some capacity there, as well as there was a 2 classroom addition as a part of the big project for the auditorium items that happened at Zimmerman High School as well. So at that point, both of those schools also increased their capacity as well. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Stangler to talk through a little bit more of our enrollment trends specifically in the South.
So here we have some of John's favorite colors, ketchup and mustard, and a little bit of orange in there. So these numbers we shared with you last time, and they are just all encompassing when we look at grades K through 4 in the southern end of the district. So that includes Prairie View, Otsego, Hassan, and Rogers Elementary Schools. You can see from a capacity perspective, the yellow indicates the overcapacity and the orange indicates over by at least 10% capacity. there's capacity to some extent in the K-4 range. When you look at the middle schools, grades 5 through 8 at Rogers and Prairie View Middle Schools, they combined are over capacity today, and they will move into that orange range of 10% or more over, and then eventually the red range of 20% or more over. The high school is over capacity today and is projected to remain over capacity for the duration of the next 10 years, with them being over by at least 10% now, in 27, 28, and then 20% or more, which is the red, starting in the school year 28, 29. So this graph just graphically shows you current year, 5 years out, and 10 years out, where we expect the capacity to be, the capacity utilization in each of the spans in the south, K4, 5-8, and 9-12. As we've shared before, when you break it down to individual buildings, the picture does change. You can see at the elementary level, which looked to be fine for a few years, you'll notice that Hassan and Rogers Elementary schools are going to be over capacity either now or in the very near future. Whereas Otsego and Prairie View are not projected to be over capacity with our current boundary lines in the south. Rogers Middle School, you can see they're experiencing capacity issues much more quickly than Prairie View Middle School, which we won't see that for a little while. And then finally, Rogers High School, you can see that coming in. So taking that 1, 5, and 10-year approach, what this graph shows, so this is a new graph for you to look at. This graph puts it in numbers to say, well, how much? Because percentages sometimes can hide the numbers. So we broke down the Rogers area for elementary, so just Hassan and Rogers Elementary, along with Rogers Middle School. And you can see that 5 years out, those two, that span, that K-8 span, is going to be roughly 500 students over capacity, not quite, but close. And in 10 years, you can see that negative 776. That's looking at the elementary and middle school capacities combined are going to be nearly 800 students over capacity. When you look at the Prairie View, Otsego, and Prairie View Middle School area, you can see that they have remaining capacity at the elementary level for the next 10 years, but they're running out. They will run out in 10 years with our current patterns. Prairie View Middle School will be over capacity in 5 years, a little bit more in 10 years. The growth rate in Otsego compared to the Rogers area is slightly different right now. And the next slide, I'll show you a little bit of why. And then you can see the south combination for Rogers High School, just looking at that school alone. In 5 years, will be around 680 students over capacity, and in 10 years, will be around 950 students over capacity. So in some of the presentations tonight, we're going to be talking about the north end of Rogers Middle School zone. So I'm just going to come up here and highlight this. Going around, this is Prairie View Elementary, Otsego Elementary, Hassan Elementary, and Rogers Elementary. This line right here, it's not a river, it's 65th Street, but this has been our line ever since Hassan opened in the mid-2000s. So coming over here and seeing this group of students right here, technically this is Otsego, because here's the river, but this line is right north of where we're seeing a lot of student population. There's a lot of growth in this area, and this is expected to continue. This is also where we have land for a school already purchased, right in this area over here. So when we talk about the north side of the Rogers Middle School attendance zone, we're really talking about, generally speaking, this area, just to give you some context of the location that we're talking about.
And that's the Curl River?
Yes, that's appropriate. So, we're going to walk through three different proposals. The first two proposals from the task force primary proposal was to build an Otsego or a high school in Otsego. Names are not determined yet, but and then address the remaining capacity issues either through additions or construction of elementary or middle schools. So those are the first two proposals. They also had a secondary proposal which was to build an elementary school and then either additions or some other solution for the high school issues, because what they saw was what you've seen is we have two issues, one being the high school issue, the other being a K-8 population and distribution. Then we'll take a look at some additional facility-related considerations. So proposal one. Proposal one is to build a full high school in Otsego, roughly a 1,900 student high school comparable to Rogers High School, with a cost of roughly $230 million, and then a new K-8 school in eastern Otsego with capacity of 800 students for approximately $85 million. Both of these would be built on land that is presently owned by the school district. So for each of these, we'll show you the proposal, we'll talk about the high school implications, we'll talk about the K-8 implications, and then we'll talk about any considerations that come with the plan. So this assumption, the new high school opens in the fall of 2030. That's 5 years out, might be able to open in the fall of 29, but we're just trying to maintain that 5 and 10 year look. If we did this, and the students attended the school they were designed to. In other words, no phase-in, like we did on the graph that you saw from Corey earlier with the Elk River High School and Rogers and Zimmerman. This draws the line and moves the students at that time. So if we did that, in 5 years, you can see the population at Rogers High School would be 1,327, and Otsego would be 1,241. And then in 10 years, you would see the population at Rogers High School at 1,546, and the population at the new Otsego High School to be 1,286. Once again, the idea here is that students, as soon as we open the building, you go to the new high school, which isn't necessarily what we're proposing to do. We're just giving you that visualization of what that would look like. And this maintains that line that I just stood up and talked about, the difference between Rogers High School and, Rogers Middle School and Prairie View Middle School. So this is the high school portion. The K-8 portion would be a new K-8 middle school, roughly 800 student capacity. It would not change boundary lines between Rogers Middle and Prairie View. So that main line would maintain, but the new K-8 would take the northern part of the Rogers Middle School zone, that area that I just identified, that purplish area in East Otsego. It would become a Rogers High School feeder, so it would be still aligned to Rogers High School, and it would add 800 students of capacity for the grades K through 8. And you can see population-wise, the percentage of utilization, we would still be around 103% at Prairie View Middle School. And just a note on the key, the Rogers Middle School, Prairie View Middle School with the asterisks, those include the feeder elementary schools. So the Rogers Middle School aligned schools, which would also include the new K-8, would be at 99% capacity in 10 years. Whereas the Prairie View schools would be at 103% capacity, mostly driven by the 75 overcapacity projected at Prairie View Middle School. That's where that's coming from. So the variables.
Yeah, so in each of these different proposals, as we were working through the conversation of how to prepare some ideas for you on what those actual cost elements would be like, we came across some different variables that we just want to make sure we brought to the board's attention. And how some of this might actually get rolled out and what some of those planning elements might be. So as an example, implementation planning, like Joe had referenced and like we did previously, would we start the school with that clear line in the sand to say all students go there, or would we have some kind of a phased approach? That can certainly impact some of what the building planning might look like. Similarly, would we do a phased approach for activity spaces? This proposal currently has trying to replicate exactly what we have like at a Rogers High School experience. There could be some opportunity of doing some phased-in approach to some of those spaces as well. And that implementation plan for our grade levels that would be attending the building. Some of the external variables that we don't quite have the answers to yet because we don't control them would be things like what are the roadways and utilities that would look like from the city's perspective for those different sites as we would be continuing to pursue a proposal one option.
Save questions or ask them after each proposal, or see the next one and then maybe ask.
Anyone has questions, they can ask at any time.
Under utilization, about 3 slides back,
Yep.
you had it, not that one, there we go. So we're running at 65%, 68%.
Yep. That's if you build a full
That's right.
1,900 student high school.
So are we overbuilding, you think?
Well,
It's a guess, right?
I think when you see proposal 2, you'll maybe answer that question.
Okay. Gotcha.
For proposal 1 here,
Yep.
would this require some redistricting as well? Because this is just looking at the south, and we have the room in the central and north, right? So if we're going to build a school and there's still going to be over capacity, we could solve that by shifting some boundaries.
Yeah, so when we're looking at this, the primary look is what happens in 5 years and then looking out 10 years. The overcapacity that existed at Prairie View Middle School may require a small addition in the future. I think when we look at the amount of overcapacity, we feel comfortable at this point in time from a big plan perspective that we'll be able to accommodate that in the future. I think it's more just looking at what we see as the largest issues that we're seeing in the South. Now with these proposals, and thank you for asking that, Chair Norris, we are only looking south of the Mississippi. So these proposals are not taking into account moving any students north. It's really, I think the last time we talked, we looked at no construction and movement. Tonight we're just looking at the construction solutions to give you that picture to then identify where do we think we want to go. All right, so the next proposal is a smaller high school, a 1,300 student high school versus a 1,900 student high school. And then a different solution for grades 5 through 8, or grades K through 8. So this solution would be a 5-8 middle school and then a Hassan addition. So the Hassan addition would add 300 students of capacity. The 5-8 middle school would add 600 students of capacity to the schools in the South, and they would specifically be in that Rogers High School alignment. So if we built a 1,300 student high school, you can see the blue bars are about the same, or exactly the same, because we're still maintaining the same population as the Rogers High School feeder. But because, and the population at the new high school is exactly the same as what you saw in Proposal 1, but because we're only building a 1,300 student high school, you can see the capacity utilization is much higher. And as we talked about, this assumes that boundary line right where we drew it. I think those are some of the things for consideration. Is that the permanent boundary line we're going to use? But you can see this does not go over capacity for the high school, building it at a smaller level.
I was kind of wondering what's the acceptable buffer? You know, when you have a program, you're gonna say, okay, we could have a little bump later on, but what buffer do we target?
Yeah, and we felt comfortable with the 1,300.
Yeah, I think for us, we were looking at that 10-year plan. We were
Correct.
10 years out from the scheme of it, 99%, 95%. We were saying 10 years, you're getting all the kids. in.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
So where's the buffer? I don't know where the sweet spot is, but
Yeah.
in that 10-year plan.
So the idea would be almost, in a 10-year plan, but also have something scalable
Yes.
in the future, right? So if you
The
did,
ability to add on.
okay.
Well, and what we saw with Elk River High School, just going back to the history, when it opened, the students who became seniors stayed there. And remember, that was only grades 10 through 12, so it was different grade configurations. But the kids who were there as juniors, when the new buildings opened, they didn't open with senior classes. The seniors stayed at Elk River High School. The junior classes had the option. And in both Zimmerman and Rogers, about half of the students returned to their home high school and half stayed at Elk River High School. We provided transportation for 1 year. The sophomores never had been at Elk River High School because our middle schools held 9th grade at that time. So those students then were assigned to their new high schools. We still did see student movement in the first few years because, well, my sibling, my brother, sister went to Elk River High School. I wanted to go to Elk River High School. And that's why when you look at that 5-year mark and then that 10-year mark, really by 10 years, students were really attending their home high school. We still see movement today. We still do see some students from Elk River going to Rogers and Rogers, well, not anymore, because it's closed, but Rogers to Elk River and Otsego to Elk River. We still see movement, but it's at a much smaller scale than it was at the initial implementation. So in this proposal, it's a slightly different solution to the K-8 population, building a 600 student middle school and then adding 300 students of capacity to Hassan Elementary with an addition. That 900 student capacity for K-8 programming, you can see the red bars don't change in this model, but the blue bars are slightly lower because we're adding slightly more capacity for the K-8 population in the south.
So some of those variables, similar to the previous one, that phased implementation of the high school kind of goes along with some of the conversation you're having of at what point are we determining where that building is going to be. Obviously, costs are cheaper when you do it on the front side than if you wait 10 years to build additions. So at what point are we making the decision on what the size of that high school is going to look like for the students attending, as well as those phased approach for activity spaces, and essentially for the building as well, where we would potentially then be looking at additions to increase the capacity of that building at that 10-year mark. And then also that Hassan addition, would that also include early childhood? If you're going to remove early childhood out of the Rogers Elementary building to increase Rogers Elementary capacity, we would replicate that as part of the addition of Hassan to still serve the early childhood audience that we do as well. And then similar variables for the new construction in those communities, looking at roadways and utilities, just some unknowns that we don't have at this point.
So proposal 3, the task force had their primary proposal, which was a new high school and then other solutions for K-8. Their secondary proposal was to add an elementary school and then either add on or move 9th grade. What we're presenting is the idea that we're trying to keep 9-12 together. So we didn't look at that, but this proposal is looking at an addition onto Rogers High School for 1,000 students. You recall earlier, we needed roughly 950 students of capacity. So the proposal would be to add 1,000 students of capacity at 130 million. A new K-8 school, once again, in East Otsego on the Otsego-owned land for 85 million. And then the Hassan addition for 13 million adding 300 students with that. So what you can see, this obviously, because we're not adding a high school in this proposal, you can see there's only one bar, and the 1,000 student addition, basically bringing Rogers High School close to 2,900 students of capacity, will be at roughly 89% in the year 30-31. We'll be back up to 98% in the school year 35-36 with that additional 1,000 student capacity. The K-8 and Hassan addition, so this is just a different iteration of what you've seen for the K-8 solutions. Once again, we're not looking at changing the boundary lines between Rogers Middle and Prairie View Middle, that larger boundary line. We would take the north part of the Rogers Middle School zone and assign K-8 to that part of the zone, and then we would add 300 students onto Hassan Elementary, which would add a total of 1,100 students of capacity. So you can see the blue bars in this model are the smallest from a percent utilization, because we're adding the most K-8 capacity. So we're adding 1,100 students of K-8 capacity, so that brings those blue utilization rates to their lowest. Once again, because we didn't move that zone, Prairie View the Prairie View Middle School feeder is still riding at that 96 to 103% capacity, because the priority of where is the biggest concerns are really in the Rogers schools right now.
Some of the variables for this plan, there are quite a bit more, because we're working with an established known for some of the spaces that we have already operating. So part of the question that we kept going back to with this plan was, what would be that long-term plan for Rogers High School? Is the idea to have the campus become a long-term future addition, and that would be where we would continue to grow into the future? And if that was the case, is that space suitable for having even another expansion into the future after this 1,000 student addition? On the reverse side, if the plan was to say this is a temporary solution until we might also be considering an additional high school, what we would probably design the proposal to look a little bit different depending on what things would go into the site plan, if it was only a temporary plan until the new high school would come online. We also came across that likely there would need to be some additional land to make this plan operational. One, certainly for building additions, looking at things like construction additions or relocated services. So things like if we built the existing building over to the north, or we might take up some more parking in some fields, we would then need some additional space to allocate for what we had to relocate into those additions, or literally new space that would just be where this new construction could go. As we did some of the analysis on the current site, it is definitely undersized, both by our norms and by MDE standards for another 1,000 students to be on that location. Certainly we need to be looking at land for things like traffic control, looking at additional access points, increased parking lot, which is already strained in the building where it's at, and with another 1,000 students in the building, likely looking at some more field spaces as well, whether it had to be relocated or additional due to the increased capacity. Some other external variables, definitely some concerns about the roadways there. An example would be the 141st current intersection. To have another additional 1,000 student capacity, there's a lot of strain on the system that's already being analyzed by the city. And some capacity and access points probably to look at increases to help get students into those parking areas other than that singular location. Adjacent properties, we don't own those currently. We would have to know that there is some opportunity for those purchases and what that would look like. And then all of that also has to go through MDE's approval for getting this package approved from the state level. Some different construction variables that we had some conversation about. One was stormwater control. Right now we are very stressed at the site on where the available amounts of stormwater can go, and with that increased construction capacity, we need to be analyzing where that might go in a site that doesn't have a lot of space for it, which we'd probably be exploring some more opportunities like underground storm chambers to accommodate that rainwater runoff. The grading of the land access to the east, so the property that moves towards the east is at a different grade level than we are currently operating under. So whether that would mean moving to the new grade level or having to do some grading to level it out to the current high school level would be some certain variables we need to explore. Those storm shelter considerations as we run into in a lot of our different buildings, with the increased capacity of the building, we also need to be planning for the accommodated growth of storm shelter access as well for that increased capacity. And then increase in building support program spaces, so things like the cafeteria spaces, parking, current maintenance amount that is dedicated to the current school, locker room, weight room, gyms, things like that. We need to analyze some of those pieces too to see with that additional 1,000 students at the building, what those supports could really look like, and if those have to be expanded as well. And then something, Will brought up a great point of something that has come up at many other sites where they're doing construction in currently operating buildings, but to definitely thought it was worthwhile to make aware. That would be an operating construction site for roughly 3 to 4 years, while it would be coming to completion. And very important for us just to be aware that that would be a variable of operating a school under a construction site as those additions would be put in place as well.
So just a quick summary of the 3 proposals. You can see here what proposal did we just share with you? What is the solution? How much capacity are we actually adding both at the high school and then at the K-8 level? And then the total cost on the right of each of the different proposals. I think when we look at the K-8 solutions, because we really tried to keep 9-12 at the high school level and K-8 at not intersperse them, really the K-8 solutions are somewhat independent of the high school solution. It could result in different boundary lines, but as far as the capacity pieces go, you could take a K-8 solution from proposal 3 and a high school from proposal 2, and they fit. Those pieces are somewhat interchangeable. All right, so that's the 3 main proposals. Corey will talk about some of the other things that we're considering.
Yeah, so wanted to make sure that we brought forward at the same time we're having this discussion around some of the other conversations that have been happening throughout the district and within our communities, and other variables that might come in, of course, part of that planning piece as well. So the first is the conversation you're all very well aware of our setting for an ELC building plan, roughly about a $30 million estimate. Basically what to look at there is some opportunities of what would we want to consider as far as location for a site like that. We've had some conversations about CTE improvements and enhancement at both Zimmerman Middle School, High School, and Elk River High School. The Zimmerman Middle School, High School would likely be an addition plus some renovation areas, so that would come in about $8,500,000. And the Elk River High School would be mainly renovation on some spaces within the building, so it would be about a $7,500,000 cost estimate. Then also looking at some safety enhancements at 2 of our buildings, one being Zimmerman Middle School, High School. Likely with that and the Rogers Middle School safety enhancements would be some additions plus some interior renovation of spaces that would be repurposed. So the Zimmerman Middle School, High School, about $6 million. The Rogers Middle School, $5,500,000. A gymnastics gym, specific in the southern area of the district, has been looked at for a while. About an $8 million cost estimate. Pool has been a request from our communities for many years. Again, in the south, at about a $15 million cost estimate. And then increases in the south on baseball and softball stadium spaces at roughly about an $8 million cost estimate as well.
That's our portion of the presentation. Any questions?
When you talked about the addition at Rogers and keeping 3 to 4 years while students are going there, that has an addition, would that be done in the summer? Or would they be under construction during the school year as well?
It would be, I think that would happen, could happen during the school year as well. I don't know that we necessarily talked, it's a much smaller addition.
I don't think we could probably commit to doing it all in one summer. But because it is exterior, some of that work may be able to be done, right guys?
Yeah, it would definitely need more than the summer, but it's isolated and sort of already master planned for an addition there. And the way that site is set up, it'd be pretty easy to separate. There would still be some operational and safety things we'd have to implement, but it'd be a lot easier than the Rogers site.
For the Rogers addition, do we need the land, additional land now to do the addition, or you're talking after the addition, if we were to do another one in the future, we need additional land?
Yeah, I'll certainly rely on our wall partner as well too. I think as we kept on going through the conversation, the addition of a building is going to remove some of our current capacity of what we're doing, whether it's parking, access to our field spaces, things like that. So at the very minimum, by just creating the additional wing, we will lose something that would, I'm assuming, would want to be repurposed into some location. As the capacity and elements would grow, especially because of some of the additional needs that would come with an additional 1,000 students at the location, we likely would have to have the land just for things like that parking access, the increased capacity of what's going to happen in that building. We would need the land very quickly to the point that we're doing the expansion.
Yeah, we've used the term shoehorning. Without the land, you really would be trying to shoehorn in 1,000 student addition. That's how we kind of thought it.
So that the 228 million for the addition for Rogers, that number isn't including the purchase of land or the storage of rainwater runoff or the regrading, or is it some of that included?
Correct. We have to buy the property. That would be separate. I'm guessing that our estimates would not include the work that we have to do on that property. We're talking about specifically what we have.
I can almost imagine a high school addition, when you're working around existing infrastructure and all that, you're gonna have a pretty significant cost in working around everything versus, greenfield expansion.
Yeah, there's a premium there. I mean, we've obviously done it on most of the sites, but it's extra complicated with this size of an addition. It's essentially adding on a large middle school or a small high school onto an existing site. So we'd have to coordinate all the shutdowns and that around the summer.
I think the big unknown is we don't have the land east of there, so being landlocked like that is gonna be tough.
And not for a lack of effort.
Yeah.
Lots of conversations about that property come up. Lots of conversations with the city and us about that property and that whole area. What could that look like in the future? Regardless if an addition goes on or not, some type of additional property there in partnership with the city is probably necessary.
So a K through 8 school versus a 5 through 8 school, you'd be looking at 200 additional students, that would be elementary, that would be K through 4, if you have early childhood there.
Possibly. I think the part of why we thought that it was a nice proposal to bring forward is the success that we had when we did the same thing with Prairie View at its opening. Give some of that opportunity, like the proposal too of the high school potential expansion, that it serves a purpose for a period of time, then can become whatever that other site needs to be in the future when the new capacity is needed for that growth. So that was well received by the community and worked well in our operational model.
And that would go on the land in eastern Otsego, the K through 8.
Correct.
Whether it's the K-8 or the 5-8, we would be looking at the land in eastern Otsego, regardless of what configuration we put up. That
Better
would be
design
the
for
location.
building of that capacity of the high school site.
What do we call it, 38, 39 acres?
Yeah, almost 40. Yeah.
And to clarify, that building can be repurposed at any time in the future, K-8, 5-8, it's very easy to move. So in 10 years, if an addition is put on in Otsego, those students are moved, it can be easily reutilized.
Likely to be designed similarly to how we did the same thing with the Prairie View model.
So when we come down to the options though, you know, the addenda, say addendi of some of the extra, you know, like the setting 4 we've talked about quite a bit. That would go, what do you foresee, where would that land, you know, in terms of, I should say, where would that end up being built?
Yeah, we didn't specify it in this plan because it might depend on some of those existing spaces and whichever model we would lean in towards. Some of the different solutions that are brought forward, even one that was through the idea of the task force, was to potentially utilize that campus kind of opportunity with some of the existing construction, but could also be repurposed spaces like in Ivan's current location or something like that too. But we really didn't specify that as much, just what the construction cost would be.
I mean, what would be ideal for a setting 4? You know, would it be close to the same, or would it be like you got Guyver going down, so you're gonna have a separation there, so you got high school here and setting 4 over here across the street? Would that be a better scenario? Setting 4 ALC?
I think you probably want separate.
More separation is better.
Well, that way the ALC students, if they had something at the high school, you know, that
Can
would,
still access.
yeah, because it'd be across the street versus a car rider. That's right now.
Any questions?
I just wanted to clarify that we can do like proposal 2 for the high school, mixing it with number 1, that proposal for K through 8.
Yeah.
Because
Right, the high school proposals are really kind of the 3 option of the high school concept. Those essentially K through 8 models to serve any of those are also separate, so any of those combinations could work.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just so for the board, I should have probably said this to start the meeting. Most of the work session is for discussion to get our questions answered and to hear some proposals. But what we'd like to come out with tonight is whether or not we'll kind of start to narrow down so that the administration can better move down a path of getting us some real accurate numbers on the proposal that we're looking for, but with the idea that we can get a survey out to the public. So that so we'll hear from Ellers on what it would cost to do some of these options, and we're going to talk about the survey and some questions we could ask to see how the community feels about those questions. We need to get going on the survey tonight, so at the end of the meeting, that's the goal. To be able to have a survey that we can agree upon with some of these solutions that can go out to the public. Because as we saw in the first meeting, we need to have it done by May. So,
The school perception is correct.
that'll be last. Great.
All right. Good evening, I'm Jody Sasbaugh with Ellers. Nice to see all of you again. So we have put together some overall information, some ballpark information that aligns pretty close, I think, to some of the options that were just presented. Whenever we talk about asking the community for support, we like to talk about the tax base composition so that you know how it impacts your different types of property owners. So this is what the overall market value of your district looks like now for the different types of properties. So we are heavily residential at 70% of the overall market value. Other residential would be apartments, condos, that sort of thing at 11%. Commercial industrial 15.3%. That's been increasing a little bit over time, which is great to see. Non-qualifying ag is house, garage, and 1 acre, and then the qualifying ag is all of the other land that agricultural owners have. And then you have a little bit of seasonal rec property. So importantly for school districts, your taxes are spread on 2 different tax bases, different than other taxing jurisdictions. So that middle column there, referendum market value, there are just a handful of categories of levies that are spread on that, but it includes the operating referendum that you present to the voters. So in that case, then residential homesteads, while they represent about 70% of the overall market value, they pay 72% of the taxes, because you'll see at the bottom qualifying ag and for the most part seasonal rec properties are exempt from paying toward those taxes. The final column is net tax capacity, all of the other levies, so if you can picture your MDE budget report, that's like 39 pages in size 4 font. All of the rest of the levies then are spread on what's called net tax capacity. In that case, you can see the residential homes pay about 61% of those taxes. And then commercial industrial has some higher tax class rates. Those are not determined by you, those are determined by the legislature, but then they pick up a greater share of those levies at almost 27%. So as shown at the bottom of that column, all of your other school taxes, including your building bonds, so as we talk about bonds for these construction projects, they would be spread on this tax base. And you can see as a share of the overall levy, you're pretty balanced right now. About 48% of your total levy is referendum market value based and 52% net tax capacity. So the types of questions that you can ask the voters to support, a couple that support your day-to-day learning. So we often talk about levies are for learning, so operating referendum falls in that category. And the capital project levy, which if you're not familiar with, many school districts have voter-approved capital project levies in place. For the most part, they use them to cover technology costs. So most districts even call it their technology levy, but it can be used for other capital costs too. And that's becoming more and more common, and we'll show you some data on that in a minute. And then we talk about bonds are for building. So as you talked about all your construction projects tonight, those would be financed by building bonds approved by the voters. This is the current state of your voter-approved operating referendum authority. So you can see that that's in place for taxes payable in 29, fiscal year 2030. It is subject to the inflation factor that is determined by the state each year. And so it's right around 1545 right now. And expected to go up to almost 1650 at the time the final year is in place. There is the opportunity to board renew that on a one-time basis. All districts who have had that opportunity have taken advantage of that so far because districts have been asking for that for many, many years, and the legislature finally approved it with some caveats. So you can approve your voter-approved operating referendum authority as a board on a one-time basis at the same dollar amount and at the same term. And you must allow for public comments before you take action to approve that. So that is an opportunity that you'll have in the not too distant future. And you can see that your operating referendum is very important to your day-to-day operations and to your general fund budget, raising about $23 million for the current year. This is a chart that shows the voter-approved authority for operating referendum, and then as I talked about that capital project levy. So this is interesting, I think, for you to see because it's all of the districts that are part of AMSD, or Association of Metropolitan School Districts. And you are toward the bottom. There are 34 districts that have higher authority than you and 12 that have lower authority. I'm not sure if I can get this to show up a little better on the screen or not. Let's see here. Yeah, there you are. So a couple of things that I'll point out is that you'll see most of these districts now do have a blue bar associated with them. That's the capital project levy or technology levy. You do not. There are only 3 school districts that have higher total authority than you that don't have a capital project levy. And then 8 on this list that are below you also don't have capital project levy authority. Not for lack of trying. Some have asked their voters to approve capital project levies and haven't been successful. But it's a growing part of budgets for districts, and you'll see at the very top there, the largest capital project levy authority is Hopkins at $2,041 per student. So just to give you a little context around those voter-approved operating levies. And then a little bit about where you are for taxes payable 25. We don't have final tax statements yet from the counties for taxes payable 26. But for 25, your average value home was about $400,000. It's still at about that same level. And if you look at, we tried to pick districts that are suburban districts that are growing, because that is often a little bit different profile as you're growing and you need to address the needs of that growth. So with respect to Elk River, you're right smack in the middle of this chart in terms of the total school property taxes paid. So it's not the total of all of the taxes on your tax statement, because you have county taxes and city or township taxes, other taxing jurisdictions. But for the school tax portion, you're showing up just a little under $2,000 on a $400,000 home for taxes that were paid in 2025. So then we took a look at putting together some solutions for the financing these construction solutions. And the first one that we did is a $350 million voter-approved bond issue. So that is set up so that we're splitting it into 3 different issues. We would want to get some more detailed draw schedules from Wold so that we could see whether we're in good shape on the getting you the money when you need it. But based upon some overall assumptions that we've made right now, we have that put in place because you wouldn't need all of the money up front. So issuing a portion of authority at different points in time generally has made the most sense for school districts as they work on larger construction projects like this. We do have that spanning over 26 levies, so if you counted those yellow bars, which are the new potential building bonds, that's what that represents. I should mention that the blue bars are your existing debt. We have been able to refinance bonds for you not too long ago, which allowed us some additional flexibility and allow us to mitigate the tax impact of any new bonds that you would need to propose to the voters, so that's been really helpful. We have facilities maintenance bonds figured in, as well as annual pay-as-you-go long-term facilities maintenance levies. And that right now is set up with 7 future facilities maintenance bond issues ranging from $13 million to $29 million. The annual project costs through 2030 are at $22 million. We bumped that up during the last round of construction so that you could get some additional projects accomplished while you were working in those buildings. That generally makes a lot of sense when school districts are working on some larger projects like that. We do have the annual projects through 2031 and later back down to a level of $11 million. And so just to point out that assumption and whether we need to address that or change that a little bit in the future, that's what we have in this plan at this point in time. We did increase our growth assumptions because the district has been growing quite a bit. Most year in Texas Payroll 23-24 was like 7 to 8%. Then we had a couple years of double digits. In 25, it was only 0.6%. But the legislature made a change to give the residential homeowners some tax relief, and so that kind of brought down your growth in that 1 year. So for now, we've got 13 years of growth ranging between 3% initially and then 0.5% in some of those outer years. We're really trying to capture the new properties. We don't want to assume, we know that there's growth in your valuations on existing properties, but we're really trying to capture the growth in the new properties, because if we assume the entire amount of growth, we're just exacerbating the taxes on the existing property owners. So that's what we're trying to capture in those growth assumptions. I think that, and I will say that in terms of interest rates, we probably have 0.5% to 0.75% of cushion compared to existing rates. We sold the remaining authority on both Stillwater and South Washington County Schools bonds last week. So we have a pretty good sense for where the market is now. They sold 20-year bonds, so a little bit shorter than what we have proposed for your issues. We have them set up at about 22 years, but you have a higher bond rating than they do. So I think with all of that being said, we're in pretty good shape in terms of the reasonableness of the interest rate that we've assumed for these bond issues. So the other option that we looked at was $250 million, and this then results in 25 levies, as you can see with those yellow bars there. Also, importantly, I think with this structure, we do have a couple step downs that we're able to build in. to the capacity that you have then available in the future. So knowing that there likely would be some more needs if you went with a smaller voter-approved option at this point in time, we just wanted to make sure that we provided some flexibility for that in the future. And this has 7 future facilities maintenance bond issues. Again, bond amounts $12 million to $29 million, with the annual projects at $22.1 million through 2030, and then down to $11 million for 2031 and later. All of the other assumptions on growth and interest rates are very similar between both of these two proposals. Oh, and importantly, on the $350 million, we're showing an increase on a $400,000 home of about $17 per month for the $350 million ask. And then on $250 million, we are showing $10 per month on a $400,000 home. So $120 annually for the $250 million option, just to give you some ballpark numbers on that. So the last thing that we did then is we know if there are a lot of new buildings constructed, you're likely going to have more operating costs, and I know that the district and administration wants to be cognizant of that. So we looked at some different options to provide more day-to-day funds for your operations at the new space that you would be building. So the way that we have this chart set up, all of this is on the average value home of $400,000. And we show that $250 million bond first, and then we're showing $10 million for a capital project levy. So that would then cover technology costs, similar to all of those other districts that you saw that have the blue bars associated with them. You would be accessing money for your students to target toward technology costs and cover many of the costs that are already in place, just giving you a dedicated source of funds for those costs. So as mentioned, the $250 million bond, we're estimating at about $10 per month. That operating referendum then column shows 0. The capital project levy would, at a $10 million level, would be about $20 per month. So under those two components, you would be asking for support for about $30 a month. Capital project levy question can be combined with the bond question. It doesn't have to be a separate question. So they're both spread on the same tax base, so that's why you can ask them in the same ballot question. The next option that we showed them is a $350 million bond, and then we're showing $30 of additional operating referendum support through 12.6 operating referendum and then 17.4 capital project levy. The reason that we came up with that allocation is that there is a cap on operating referendum revenue, and 12.6 is the most that you can get under the current cap. So as we look at the numbers for each of those components, the bond is the $17 per month that we just talked about, that we showed on the bar chart. The operating referendum then would be $28 a month, and I'll point out that the operating referendum has a little higher tax impact on your residential homeowners, and we saw that on the very first chart where we showed the composition of your tax base, and your residential homeowners do contribute a higher share toward any operating referendum dollars. And then capital project levy at $17.4 million would be about $35 a month, so under that scenario, we're talking a total of $80 per month for all 3 of those combined. The operating referendum would need to be a separate question. You can't include that with a bond and capital project levy, so you would need to ask the voters to support that as a separate question. And then a little bit about the timeline, which I know that you alluded to earlier. So with the November election, the review and comment would be due to MDE by mid-June. You would be required to adopt a formal resolution calling for the election. That deadline under current law, unless the legislature changes something this session, is August 11th. And then the special election this year in November is November 3rd. So lots of numbers, lots of information. I'm happy to answer any questions, or as you think of questions, as you're digesting all this information, certainly don't hesitate to let Andy or John know, and we have everything set up so we can run as many different options as you like to see, but just thought that this would give you some, at least ballpark numbers. Take a look at that, somewhat aligned with the proposals that are being considered.
So are we looking at 26 years or 25 years when you say 26 or 25 levies?
Yes.
Okay.
And they would be set up, so for example, on the first, the $350 million, we split that into 3 different issues. So each of those would have 22 levies associated with them, is the way that they're set up now. So a 22-year repayment term on the bonds. But then they'd be staggered over time, so it would span 26 different property tax levies.
We did like the total amount with not just principal, but with interest.
Yeah, those are all, and if that all gets included on the review and comment schedules, we have to go to MDE, and those are all public data. So yeah, absolutely, that would all be detailed out, and we can get that to you.
Okay, so if you're saying like year one, let's just use the $30 a month for the $350 million. Why does it always feel like it's more at the end? You know, how people say, oh, is it because our tax home values go up?
Yes, it would be a function of your home value then, because generally the tax rates have gone down as your growth has occurred. Most often, we're very conservative on the assumptions for growth, so usually the tax rates end up decreasing, so it would absolutely then be a function of the value of your home increasing.
Do you think next year tax rates will be better to do a bond?
Interest rates or tax rates?
Interest rates.
Well, that's hard to say, right? They've been fluctuating quite a bit. So, and I know they don't align always with changes in the Federal Reserve rates, but I know the Federal Reserve is now talking about maybe holding the line or maybe increasing rates again. So it's very hard to know. Yeah.
I think for clarity though, so in the event we go to structured question, if the voters were to approve it in November, we're not selling bonds until
Early in the next calendar year. Yep. So generally that first bond issue would be January, February of 2027.
I just meant like if we waited a whole other year to pause everything, because I do think we're in a, times are tough right now. I know I've said that a lot, you guys, but they really are for a lot of us. So I'm just trying to be mindful of the expense.
Yeah, I mean, no guarantee on interest rates, of course, right? Just like when you're making that decision with your own home mortgage. We do know that we've had a pattern of 9 out of 10 years when we sell early in the new calendar year, we generally do end up with more favorable rates. And that happened when we sold your refunding bonds, when we refinanced your bonds. We got a lot of demand, which drove rates down and got you excellent results. So 9 out of 10 years, we do see that selling early in the calendar year has been very advantageous. And that's been true this year to date too. We've been getting a lot of demand for municipal bonds, and rates have been coming down and a little bit lower than expected.
Jerry, go back 2 slides, please. So if we put this on, one forward, sorry. If we put this on a capital project levy, that is just one question then for bond and levy?
It can be. You can combine it, or you can separate them. So that's a choice you have.
Capital project levy would have an increased idea of inflation, correct?
Capital project levy does not have an inflation factor available. It changes as your tax base changes. So it is the only school district tax levy that is established based upon a rate that your voters approve. So if you tell us that you want to generate $10 million from a capital project levy, we convert that to a rate that raises $10 million in the first year. Every year after that it's in place, which is up to 10 years, just like an operating referendum, it will fluctuate and you will have revenue available to you that's higher or lower depending upon changing your tax base. Your tax base has been growing, so likely you would be eligible for more revenue because that rate applied to your tax base should give you more revenue each year.
An operating referendum would be tied to inflation.
An operating referendum is tied to enrollment, and then you do have the inflationary factor. So while your operating referendum changes based upon changes in your student body, your capital project levy would be fluctuating with changes in your tax base. So it's kind of nice to have both of those too. I think districts who have both those in place, it's been helpful, because when they had some decline in enrollment, which many did for a few years, or still are, their capital project levy generally has been increasing, so that's really helped their day-to-day budget.
Yes, thank you, that's helpful. Is there a way to show on the bond portion, because obviously our net tax capacity is growing, right?
Mhm.
So south of the river, they build 200-300 more homes, right?
Mhm.
We're spreading the same dollar amount over that.
Mhm.
Is there a way we could show in reality what that would be in years 2 through 5, based on growth, if we assume?
Yeah, so we did build growth in,
Okay.
and trying to maintain a nice level tax rate, so that's what you see.
That's why you're selling the bonds at different
Yes,
stages?
yes.
So you're selling the bonds at 30 as the tax capacity grows, and you're selling another set of bonds and maintaining that 30? Okay,
Mhm.
I'm following that now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So what's your assumption on tax capacity?
So we built in growth for the next 13 years at between 3% in the near term, and then dropped it down to 0.5%, because that's about as low as it has been in the last handful of years.
Okay. And that's why that rate's so low, you know, had they not done that, you just held your net tax capacity, that bond would have been a lot more. So that makes a lot more sense.
So if growth slows, will the tax rate increase?
Not necessarily. I mean, we have got lots of different levers, lots of different flexibility. You have a large bond issue that has callable maturities. So again, we can look at refinancing that. The call date on that is February 1st of 2028. So likely, we will be able to move forward and capture some savings at that point in time, which then allows us to either pay off principal more quickly, or as we look at how things are turning out, we can adjust accordingly. So there, even if your growth doesn't amount to the same level, we've got other options for being able to keep the tax rate nice and low.
I have a question. The last referendum, so this graph right here, does it show the savings that we earned by selling those bonds? And do we sell bonds every year? Or is there?
So the first question is, it would be reflected in those blue bars. So if we were to look at that existing debt prior to the refunding, those blue bars were higher. So those blue bars now have been brought down to reflect the decreases in your principal and interest commitments. We also, I'm pretty sure, I'd have to look back, but I think we moved up some of your principal payments to keep the tax rate nice and level, which again, paying off that debt more quickly, then provided you with more flexibility in the future too. So it just allowed you to have some more capacity to be able to address the new projects and mitigate that tax impact. And then generally, you guys issue bonds every other year, because that is the cycle that you've been on for your long-term facilities maintenance financing program. So your 10-year plan that you approve every summer has 3 different sources of revenue. One is bond proceeds. Generally, we issue bonds every other year to finance those projects. You get some state aid, and then you have an annual payable levy. So that is generally the cadence that you're on, but if we have a refunding opportunity, we will definitely take advantage of that whenever it makes the most sense. And we have many conversations, we watch those very closely, and want to make sure that we pull the trigger on that at a time that will benefit your taxpayers the most.
One more question. So you said the blue, is that the tall blue? Is there a color between the dark green and that blue?
There is a little slice there that is black hashtag, and that's your lease levy. And you use your lease levy for a couple of building additions that were done, I have to remember which schools those.
2016 was the last one, was one.
Thank you, yep. Yes, and this building here is eligible for lease levy. Yep, amazing. So that's what that little sliver represents. There is a little sliver in between the solid green and the blue there.
Thank you.
that little, the black line there, so it's a lease levy. What is that Westwood project paid off? Is that lease levy you guys did?
So we have lease levies going through. Looks like 2032 fiscal year, 2033 fiscal year 34. Yeah.
34 within 10 years. It was probably 14.
So we have one falling off in 2039, 2039, what did you just say?
32 or 34, I thought, when this levy goes off. Yeah.
Yeah.
26, thank you. Yeah.
And that's where we see the two little incremental drops. Because this is your, the 30 and the 80 is your total. So as we spread it out, we move in the future, you don't think that would be getting less as our 2019 referendums drop off, right?
Yeah, which would be getting less?
Okay, so in simple terms, what we'd be asking the taxpayers is, this isn't, are you talking 30 or 80? Let's just use one number, 80.
Okay.
This is additional dollars for a $400,000 house, in addition to what they're paying for 12.
That's true, yes.
It's an addition.
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
So their overall tax burden initially is going to be more until some of those start dropping off, and that's what we are seeing right now.
Well, and we're wrapping around all those drop-offs. So we're keeping a nice level tax rate, as you can see on this chart, for, for quite a number of years. So there aren't going to be any drop-offs from a debt perspective. If you have an operating referendum or capital project levy question, those can only be a 10-year term. So where we have the bonds set up for 25 or 26 tax levies and trying to keep it mainly level, especially at the $350 million option, the operating referendum capital project levies would only be in place for 10 years. We assume they would, likely be renewed or continued, but that is the maximum term that you can have on those two things.
I think one of the questions is if they're trying to look at it a little more simplified. So like your mortgage on your house, right? Yes, it might be 20 or 30 years, but we refinance these along the way. So in 2022, the board did an awesome job of selling bonds. There was over $300,000 savings. So to look at it and just state that it's going to be in there for 25 or 26 years isn't necessarily true, because if we have the opportunity to refinance it, pay it off early, change the interest rate, so they're constantly moving.
You're right.
One's from 2016, I think we've done them once or twice now, right? So they're, it's hard to look at it and just say it's going to drop off on this day, because if we get the opportunity, we're going to refinance, take the savings, pay off early, do all of that stuff, which the taxpayers will feel.
Absolutely, yep. And whenever we issue bonds, we set the call date at the time of the issue, and most commonly now, especially in a 20 or 22-year term, that would be 8 years out. So.
And are we AAA rated?
You are a AA1. So there are 3 districts that have a higher rating than you in the state. AAA is the highest, but you're a AA1.
Scenario, the top scenario there is, so we'll just break these down. The bottom one looks like to build a bigger high school, and the other one is to build a smaller high school to start. So if we have a zero operating referendum, how do we operate the smaller high school?
So the capital project levy then supplements your general fund budget and covers some of the costs that you don't have a dedicated source for. So any of your technology costs, any of your staff that are working in the area of technology can all be a part of that, can all be financed through that source of revenue. And that's what the other districts are doing that have that, again, that blue bar. If you can picture the long list of districts that I showed, that most of them have a capital project levy or that blue bar that's supporting their day-to-day operations. They're using it for a lot of their general fund costs. They're just dedicating this sort of source of revenue to cover some of their existing costs. So that really then helps to free up the money for you to operate the new space.
Thank you.
And capital project levy does put more on commercial than residential.
It does. So then you're back to the beginning here, where the commercial then would be picking up 27% of that overall levy, and homeowners would then be at a 61% level.
Any questions?
Good information. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, that was great.
Okay, let us know what else you need.
All right, lots of numbers thrown at us.
Great.
Yep. Yep. So do we want to talk about what kind of questions we think we want to ask? Would you have something?
Well, just one thing to keep in mind, the summary proposal that's out there right now. So for Rogers High School addition, that assumes working in the footprint we have. So if we take out 3 ball fields, 2 parking lots, all of this, not only do we have to purchase the land, all the grading work, but then we have to replace them. So I mean, that number, and we don't know any of that, that's why it's not on it, right? But I mean, just to understand that that number is likely going to be more than that to do all of that. And that's if we can get the land. What's that?
Too risky, I'm out for number 3.
Well, and that was part of the conversation I wanted to have, and I didn't know if we had it before or after we do the survey, but I guess if the board feels that there's a no-go, then we don't have to survey that question. But my original thought was, because I would agree with that, there's a couple for me on here that I think, there's a risk here, and it just don't make sense, right? Especially when you talk about there might be additional volume of land. But if we're sending a survey out, does it hurt to ask the question to see what the public's opinion is? That makes sense.
Right, so, yeah, I guess in my opinion, from my perspective, I like option 1 if I look at it, because if you look at the additional students and what you pay for today, if you look at what we paid for a high school in 2000 to now is 10 times that. So that's a long-term solution if we're growing. Putting an $80 tax burden on a residential home, I don't think is realistic. But from a business standpoint, a cost standpoint in building it, that makes the most sense. The 243 is a solution. It'll last 10 years. I shouldn't say last 10 years. It'll last for 1,300 students, which we would hope would be 10 years, but it may be less. From 2016 to now, we had 400 more students that came to the district than we anticipated, right? And we always want to figure in conservative. But, it's very realistic that with that 1,300 student addition in 5 to 6 years, we could be looking at adding additional wings, gyms, et cetera, which it'll be set up for. And at that time, that cost will be 5, 6, 10 times more than what it would be to build it initially. So, I mean, that's a hard road too, but $80 is a lot. If we do a survey, I would like to see the taxpayers give us their opinion on proposal 2 and 3. I think it's in their community, and I'd like to see their feedback.
So wait, you're saying that proposal 1 is the one you like the best? And you don't want to survey on that?
I like, so I like proposal 1 because 2016 we were here, anyway, from 2000 to how big this district has grown, right? I also recognize that adding another $1,000 a month to a $400,000 home is unrealistic. Or $8,000 a year, I'm sorry, too many hundred dollars. Yeah, $1,000 a month is completely realistic, but $1,000 a year, it's just not realistic. It's just hard because every time we come back and do this, the costs will, right, continue to go on. So in my opinion, option 2 is realistic. Obviously, we would build it to grow and add on. So I guess from survey results, I would like to see the community's response and opinions on proposal 2 and proposal 3.
I mean, I hear what you're saying on proposal 1. You probably have some experience, like when Prairie View Mill was built. What should we go here or here? And you landed on something and then you're out of space.
We added on to it before it was even done.
That's right. So, I mean, looking back in the rearview mirror, what are the lessons learned there?
Well, we're projecting a lot better. I will be 100% open and transparent. I mean, what Stangler's numbers now, Hazel's study, all of this, right? We have 10 years worth in 2016, we didn't have that, right? If we had some data, we had stuff, it wasn't nearly as refined as it is now. We didn't have all the conversations with the cities and all of that.
The other thing I'm thinking of is we close open enrollment, you know, Rogers High, Middle. What's gonna happen building a new school in Otsego? Will that let loose again? And
Well, all that land around it will be valued at 20% more. It's gonna be developed that much faster. I mean, that's what they did with Prairie View, right? Rightfully so.
what you're looking for is increasing tax capacity by,
Well, there's a balance, right? So in
Yeah.
5 or 6 years, have we grown enough in net tax capacity where we can come back to the taxpayers if we have to? And I think 5 and 6 years would be short to finish the school. I mean, the goal would be to go 10 years, but it's hard to say if it's realistic.
because I can see like proposal 3, you already have all this sunk cost into all the facilities at Rogers, and thinking of bulldozing all that over to put construction, and then you have to go rebuild it somewhere else. You know, and we don't have land. That's a big unknown.
Unless if we're gonna sell the land in Otsego to, you know, purchase land in Rogers, but I personally like, option 1 for the K through 8 and option 2 for the high school. But I throw that out there. It's about 255 million. I think it's a lot, but if you're gonna do it right.
Now, does proposal 2 high school include all the sports facilities? So it's a complete high school.
Auditorium.
What about gymnastics, like a higher ceiling in the gymnasium?
It does not include a separate gymnastics facility.
Oh, they have to have a separate one? You can't-
Well, they would have like another gym just for gymnastics. And we're calculating that based on what it would take to run 1,300 kids in that building, not a dedicated gymnastics added on to that. Does that make sense? So 1,300 kids would be, we'd have everything we needed at the gyms, but if you dedicated a gym to gymnastics, right, then you can't count that.
For the district, so we.
So it doesn't include gymnastics.
Because you have to set up, the equipment has to be set up in a safe way, and taking down the setup of that space from the start of the season until this time of year, so that the athletes can compete safely, and you can't set it and take it down every day for practice. So you take that dead off space, it takes that whole space offline for like classes during the day.
So the Prairie View Elementary currently has one gym dedicated to just gymnastics. And so in one of the proposals that show it building a south of the district, our own gymnastics facility. So these numbers, do any of them include like the setting for or the gymnastics or a pool in the south?
So that would be on the other list, so
Okay.
if the board were to choose to combine these projects into it, those numbers would be on top of that. So if we, you wanted to talk about capacity and things that make some of this cheaper, or try to do that, and fit some of those in, that's what
I just wanted, earlier, I wanted to share something with my subbing experience, and I drive into Rogers High School, right when it starts at the beginning of the day, and then, like, my stress level just rises because there's so much traffic, and so many cars, and kids everywhere, and to try to get to class on time. And then today, I pulled into Zimmerman Middle School, High School, and so relaxing. There's a drastic change, and I don't know many parents that go to both schools to see the difference, but if we were to add on with proposal 3, I can't imagine trying to find more parking and like more exits with what the land currently looks like.
That's a really good point. We have those conversations with our city partners to say, what's the plan for the roadways too, right? If you put another 1,000 students there, I mean, to have another, they're driving, they're parking, they're driving like teenagers sometimes too, right? And so we have to make sure it's a safe place, and there's no ways we have to how do we get into the property, could we come in from the north, that goes that way, but we don't have all those answers just yet. Some of it's not real clean, because we don't have the property.
Well, and with the discussion we've had tonight, because originally I was thinking, have a survey that had 3 questions, build a high school, whichever one we talk about we can go at, remodel or nothing, right, which would be redistricting. But hearing the discussion at the table and the new information, some of the information we had tonight, because with the need for the additional purchase of land, which isn't on that cost, and some of these other costs, it seems to me that the renovation might surpass the building of a smaller high school once we did it. So, and what I'm hearing from, plus it's under construction for 3 to 4 years. You don't have the community school in Otsego. So in my mind, and that's a tougher one for me. And if I'm hearing from the rest of the board, I don't want to pull it out too quick, but I don't know why we survey it. I don't know if no one's looking at it.
In my opinion, if you look at the proposal 3, in our district, academics are very important, and so are athletics. So there's something to keep in mind, and I think we owe it to the public to get their opinion on it, right? So, for example, athletics are going to be huge. Rogers High School is going to drop. It's going to be in a different level for a whole ton of things. Class sizes, there's going to be some of them factors, and I really just think the public should weigh in on that opinion and what their perspective is. Because I honestly would believe that whichever option comes back, and I want to be clear, I doubt one of these are going to come back like 60-40. I wouldn't be surprised if they came back 50-50 within 10 surveys, right? But we've at least put it out there, we've got their opinions, we've heard them, and then as a board, if we make a decision, I think it would be our due diligence. So I would really, from my perspective, one vote would be to see the proposal 3 on the survey.
Didn't we just change classifications? I should know this now, but like from a 7A or whatever it is for the high school league, we just changed like last year.
Yeah, for Rogers football, they went from 5 days.
Okay, so it wouldn't be like all these programs would change categories, it would just be football?
You
Or would it be?
It depends, because they're all in the rule different, so you have to go, and hockey, there's 2, so you have to stay on population. Probably, we have those conversations. We didn't want to go too much further until we sort of had, like the boards of what you want to talk about, but we didn't have much further than those proposals.
So when this happened in Zimmerman, it took almost to 2016 for Zimmerman to have all of its own independent stuff. We still don't have state hockey, right? I mean, it just takes time. And not saying that that's the only driving factor that should be looked at, but it's something to keep in mind. Making an addition like this or doing a school like this, there's a lot of consequences to it, right? Boundary lines, I mean, there's going to be a lot that changes. You're going to upset certain things. You really have to look at the long-term goal. What do we want to see in 30 years? Because that's what we're seeing today, 20-some plus years, 26, 27 years later, for when Elk River split Rogers and Zimmerman, right? It was painful for a while, but long-term now we have community schools, which was very important to our constituents.
And with experience of growing up during that time when the high school split, and that's why when they talked about those juniors and seniors choosing which school they wanted to go to, sports had a lot to do with it. Like if you were in a sport, you stayed at Elk River High School because if you went to Rogers, you would be 1A hockey instead of 2A, and you'd be a brand new fresh team, which gave more kids opportunities to play, which then the families got to decide, do we stay and play on our current team, or do we branch out and be the very first team in the school? So I feel like giving it up to the parents and like having that buffer where the juniors and seniors can choose. Well, the seniors for sure, but juniors and sophomores having the opportunity to choose.
Oh, I agree 100%. We're going to have to look at a phased approach no matter, or with a new building, look at a phased approach to try to, minimize that 100%.
And with the high school league changing a bylaw coming up here, you not be able to, you'll have to go to where your school is assigned to play your sport. You won't be able to change even if it's in your own district. So I guess that is a big deal, right?
What's that?
So let's say I play soccer at Otsego, and then there's the better team, and Rogers was adding on, you want to switch schools and just opt to, yep, my student's gonna go to this school, I'll do the transportation. They'd have to switch schools, they couldn't just play soccer for Rogers. You have to play for the school that you go to.
Oh, yeah, so back then, you would stay an Elk River student, you wouldn't be a Rogers student and you wouldn't play an Elk River. You would have to play
All or nothing.
the school that you attend. So that's why the kids chose which school they wanted to go to.
There's very strict transfer rules for high schooling, and they take it very seriously, right?
Yeah.
Going back a long time, it's, districts with very good, wrestling programs or hockey or whatever it was, actually had all their kids going and transferring, so you create the same superstar team, so to speak.
Yeah.
They have put that to the stop to that. There are transfer rules that are so strict. If we have questions, sometimes they call us and tell me where his student is, right? And you do the same thing on the other side to ask those questions, because it's a real deal, it's very serious.
Get that feeling in the last meeting.
But for clarity, when that starts, if you only have 6 students that are in high school, they'll be able to be part of another team sports, right?
We do a cooperative.
Right, we're gonna be able to do that, so to your point, Mindy, is that once it's big enough, 100%, right? But if you only have 6 students, we wanna be clear that they will have an opportunity to play sports.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
we don't offer that sport.
If, at that school, yeah, because
Okay.
there's only 6 of them, they would be part of Rogers or Elk River. We would make sure that happens until it's big enough to have its own.
Like, for example, our boys swim and dive team is all 3 of the high schools are combined into one team. Because it's not big enough for each high school to have their own, so they all combine into one.
But if it got big enough, high school would be asking us questions.
Right.
So I think the flip side is true too.
Right.
Right, yes,
Yes.
stay with Rogers forever if you had another business. They'd be asking those questions saying, you should probably have yours.
How are we gonna frame the question, the options in the surveys? Because, my concern is that, we've been talking about the special ed facility now for 3 years. And, it's one of those, we could spend $20–30 million on sports facilities and then leave out our special ed students that we need to improve the program here.
So School Perceptions has a very masterful way to actually do this. They've done it for districts all across the country, really. But they queue this up in this particular way. They would queue it up as almost a choice, like how do you feel about admission at Rogers versus a new high school? And then they would first build background information about kind of how did we get here in this question. And they would also include some of those extras if we wanted to.
Okay.
Say, how do you feel about a 74 building? Are you willing to pay for it? But at the end of the day, the survey is really measured tax dollars. Sure. Are you willing to pay for these things, right? We probably also include some things like, the board has reached a point where construction proposals are probably deemed to be the appropriate decision, right? Because of that, here are the things we're considering. They get a chance to check the box, right? School Perception they'll actually mail a survey to every household in the entire school district, right? You have the ability to scan the QR code and do it online. You can fill it out with the self-addressed envelope and mail it back, or you can go to the website and punch it in. So it's very comprehensive. Takes anywhere from 5 to 6 weeks for it to get done by the time it actually gets in people's hands and get it back. But they are actually able to give you a very, very good data about your potential to pass a referendum, right? Based on what the community has said, assuming we get a good turnout.
And just to clarify, so if we do this survey, we're looking at doing it for 1 or 2 of the proposals, not all the other items, right? Because at the end of the day, for example, for proposal 2, you're gonna walk them through it, and then you're gonna ask them a tax tolerant of $400 a year. It's really only $360, but if we add some additional stuff, and for, if you were to do proposal 1, you'd ask them for $1,000 a year tax tolerant. But I don't think in the survey, you're not gonna ask about all these other
Schools and.
right?
Well, that's what I'm asking. You could, if you wanted to, if the board chose to, like, you really want to do some of those things, like set the board as an.
I think that gets to be a lot in the survey. I really want to see the community's pulse on 2 of the proposals. That's what I want. Because if we do, I know we don't have the numbers, I don't really in the spot, but if you do a setting 4, or you do another $25–30 million there, it's minimal impact. I don't want to say it's not anything, but I mean, probably another $30–40 a year.
With the size of it,
Right.
the size of our tax base.
So I mean, at the end of the day, you know, if we told them proposal 2 was going to cost $400 a year on a $400,000 house, that would give the board some room to add a couple of those items, and we'd still be there. If we looked at proposal 1 and told them it was $1,000 a year, that would give us room for a fair amount of items. So, but I mean, yeah.
Right, I see what you're saying, I just don't want that to be forgotten. You
No.
know, because that's in our goals.
Yeah.
Board goals and superintendent goals,
Yeah.
to fix this.
I think we need as a board to get a lot more conversations about those. I have some questions on those. But I also see the big ticket item tonight is direct the superintendent of staff with this survey to get it rolling.
Yep.
And then the board, you know, because I'll email questions on those because I have a handful.
Because what I see is sometimes, you know, some of the tangible things like CTE or having a pool are all tangible things you can see. But when it comes to special ed, you know, you've got a limited pool of people that are engaged in that area that don't understand what the programming and the staff do for these kids.
It's part of why we're here, is academics, not just sports.
Right. Well, we need to advocate for all students.
Everybody, yep.
So, and I agree, my whole idea is to get the survey going, because we can talk about different situations,
Yep.
like I heard you, Director Kuiper. There are different scenarios we can get, once we know what the dollar amount's gonna be. We could change rate the schools, or even with that big one, we could not do all sports facilities and do some of these. So we'd be here all night trying to figure that out. So what I'm thinking is to do is we get a couple questions, we'll know, hey, is this a no-go? Like, is it no taxes? We'd rather do, because the way it would look on the survey is we'd ask the question, this is what it would cost to do these 2 scenarios that the board is looking at. This is what it would look like if we did nothing. So there would be a redistricting scenario in there as well. So that we would know, is the community okay with paying more? Or would they rather do the redistrict? Now, having said that, we do want to be open about it. We don't want to do a $43,000 or $250,000 question, and then adding 30 would be quite a bit, or not give them what they wanted, not do the sports fields, and do a special. That would be misleading. So I'm wondering if on the survey we should add a question. So do the 2 questions, do the build a new high school, addition onto Rogers. This is what it looked like if we don't do those, meaning redistricting. Would you be supportive of the 30 for setting 4? We could do a separate question, because that's the biggest cost item on here. It would, if we just asked 245, and then the board decides later for setting 4 to move forward with a different option of getting more money, and you didn't get a sports field, or you didn't get something, just an idea.
But that $30 million is nothing compared to that 400.
Right.
And I can't do the math that quick in my head, but is it even $2 a year on a $400,000 house?
Come on, Joe.
No, never mind. But so I guess what I really want to see, to your point, I can agree with a lot of that, is I want to see if the tax tolerance there for $400 a year on a $400,000 house, and then what do they feel passionate about? One of those, proposal 2, in my opinion, or the Rogers addition. Those are the 2 that need to flush out for me, with an understanding that if we don't do this, here's what's going to happen. We're going to move X amount of kids here, right? To me, that's what I want to see is a tax credit for $400 a year and $400,000 house, and then which one of the 2 options do you like? Proposal 2 or proposal 3?
Including setting 4 in the survey would require a lot of background information. My concern would be, what we know about surveys, the longer they get, the more apt they're not to do it. Right? So we want to just be really careful that we'd have to really unpack background information so people knew what that meant, and because to your point, it's really a small population that interact at that level. So I don't know how we can talk to school perceptions about that if that's something the board wants to survey, but how we use that level, maybe not in this regard. this time when you got those two away. Maybe
I don't want to, because we already have this survey coming out, plus the other survey coming in, so I'd say now or never.
You know, what I see here though is, in 5 years, I was just doing a quick math, and I usually don't do it in public, but we have over 1,000 students being added, you know, within 5 years. So where the hell do they go? And shipping that all up north is the default, right? If we don't have capacity in the south, so it's a big deal.
Well, and that's why that needs to be on the survey.
Yep.
I think that's exactly why kids are good. You know, like that's people have asked me, like, it seems like we're moving really fast, we have to. There's 1,000 more kids that live in this district for the last 20 years, we have to move them.
It's 5.
Yeah, if you wait 2 years, that's just gonna get worse and worse and harder and harder, so.
Could we take out like the auditorium for Otsego High School, or what all is included? I didn't realize that this was different things. Because I mean, we went with all auditoriums and certain fields and, you
Yeah,
know.
it could be, yeah, those things could be taken out of it and you build, you know, the core building, right? At, you know, right now, the 1,300 kids doesn't include those other things, but yeah, you could do that.
So we're having an auditorium.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we have in our other high schools, it's just smaller, because it's 1,300 kids.
So we, okay, like even the ball fields to the football, everything, soccer.
It's a lot more land there.
Is there an
Yes, it
ice
is.
arena?
No. No ice arena, no ice arenas, the city's good, right?
So a lot of
Sure we get
things
that
that
right.
just were added in the last. We would not need those things
But I
to
think,
do it though, because we went without an auditorium in Zimmerman, we went without whatever fields in other areas. I mean, it's not what is going to, you know, make or break. We have to be able to educate the students.
I think that's the question for the board. We had a history in this district of bringing forward comprehensive experiences for kids. If it's going in stages, then we would want to plan for that. If we're not going to do those things, then when will we? Because I think we have to talk about it. The Otsego students would end up without those things, or probably as they come over, we want to have those. So,
In the future.
yeah, so what's that?
and what does that cost? I mean, so if you look at that, we really ran the 2019 bond referendum. We set a standard in the district based on this many seat building. It's got this much parking. It has this size auditorium, this many ball fields. So we really brought equity across the district. And so if we don't do that now and we carve out 5 or 10 million in savings, again, it's really minimal. And then when we come back and do it, it's what, 4 or 5 times the cost? And at the rate it's growing, and based on the rate it's grown in the past, it seems like we would be there in a short term doing it. In my opinion, it wouldn't be a long-term solution for the taxpayers. They would pay 5 to 6 times more to do it.
Seems like a lot.
Again, we can have all those conversations. We don't need to solve that today. We're trying, our goal today is to throw all the information at you, number one. But two is just to, because we have to get the survey out, because the survey takes time to get, did you want to speak to that more? Did you have something ready to go that I haven't to say yet?
No, we have a shell of a survey, but we thought we would have it a little further along, but we had to have this conversation first. What do you want to measure? So that's why we didn't bring you a draft, because it's just really a shell. Tomorrow, we actually have another meeting scheduled with school receptions to say, how that conversation went. What can we do here this year?
Well, let's get to that. So am I the only one that wants to see proposal 3 on there for the survey?
If we include it, I would like there to be a lot of information like we got, and so people understand. It looks like the cheapest option, but the construction and parking and
All caveats.
not owning the land next to it and rebuilding fields, like that's gonna add more money, right? So even if it doesn't include that in the price tag right now, because I can see people like, let's just pick the cheapest one, and then Proposal 3 getting a lot of votes, even though they don't understand the whole picture.
It's not cheap. I can see the high school addition costing several $1 million more just for working around the existing infrastructure. It's,
Yeah. I would say to do proposal 2 or 3 at this point, we should assume a $400,000 house would be $400 a year. For either one. I mean, at this point, for this high-level conversation, right? Because we haven't added the rest of the stuff, there's many unknown factors. Yes, technically proposal 2 is only $360 a year.
15 million more than proposal 3 is what it's listed right there. Is that right?
I'm not following it. Say that again.
The total for the proposal 2 and proposal 3 is not very much. It's a very 15 million, I think.
Which I agree with you 100%, though. We have to, if the public sees this, they're gonna say, well, that's the cheapest, right? And it's not, especially because it might be considerably more than option 2 if you had to purchase land, which we don't know what that would cost. If we could even do it, it might not even be an option because they might not sell it to us.
And why are we taking proposal 1 out? Why don't we, if we have a survey, give them 1 and 2 if 3 is really not.
Not tenable, yeah. That would let us know the tax dollars.
I think we're missing a group of constituents that will be upset if they don't have a voice on proposal 3.
Okay.
That's my opinion. When I'm down south of the river talking to people about this stuff, I see a very hard split between building a new high school and adding on and making Rogers the quote-unquote super high school. So if we don't do that, we may have a group that come forward when it's time to vote in November and just say, you didn't give us options, we're going to say no.
yeah.
So let's include the price tag being higher then, because.
Well, again, if you use $400 a year on a $400,000 house, that'll easily cover proposal 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty there. So the question, in my opinion, and again, maybe I don't want to step on your toes here, but the question on tax dollars would be, on a $400,000 house, would you support a $400 tax increase a year? That would give us an idea. If they say no, then we got to come back and relook at the whole thing. If they say yes, then we would ask additional questions about proposal 2 and 3 to get an idea which one of those 2 they like.
I believe the survey would actually break out by 100,000, 200,000.
It would.
So it would break it out, and so you can go through it to look at your value and say, where do I stack on these schools, right? And you can get some idea. So it wouldn't be just the $400 per year, you would actually be able to have a bunch of them. But I think that, to your point, it does cover proposals too.
I see your point.
Plus, it would give us, I mean, if you looked at it, again, I think you'd be able to do setting 4 and a half dozen, because again, you know, $400, an extra $40 a year, that's a lot. I mean, we can do several $1 million in projects with that.
Do you have enough information?
I think I do, actually. I just want to make sure. Proposals really 2 and 3 would be the primary ones that we would have. The addition of Rogers High School or a new high school. That's what we would
I
do.
disagree, I would say 1 and 2, 100%.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
not the addition.
If people leave the space, Otsiegel's growing, the school, the whole thing started for Otsiegel, for the high school there, to address the capacity. And to not do it, that is really shocking. And then how much sooner are we gonna go back to the taxpayers when Otsego wants their own community schools? And I don't see that Zimmerman has a pool in here, so I don't think the North will like it, but.
Well, that's a good point because
Okay, but what are
that's
we
the one
getting?
thing that was said during that I hadn't heard before. But the addition, like for me, an addition isn't a temporary, we're not gonna do this and then build a high school later. Like for me, no on 3, right? So that's the first I've ever heard that we do option 3 now and still do option 2 in 5, 10 years. I'm not looking for a Band-Aid, I'm looking for a permanent solution myself.
Well, but option 2 or 1, are you gonna add on to them at some point too?
I don't know, the birth rates are down, there's private schools, charter schools, everything's growing, homeschooling, I mean.
Yep, and yet we're still growing and birth rates don't affect us. We see them coming in after the kids are born. So I mean, all the data for the past 10, 12 years that we have shows that, and if you go all the way back to 2000, look at the way we've steadily grown in upper projection.
Can you go to slide 21? It says proposal 3, 1,000 student addition on Rogers High School. It says in the year 35, 36, it's going to be up to 98% again.
Right.
No, Nope, back. It's all three bars of blue. Right, right there. See 98%. So in 10 years, if we do the third proposal, it's gonna be near capacity. And then we need to do something else, right?
But you're gonna have that with proposal two, go back to proposal two.
So that's why we should give the option of one
That's
and
middle,
two.
that's the middle, there you go.
The purple one.
There you go.
So you're gonna get 99% there with a 1,300 student. Either way, we're talking about 1,000 to 1,300 students, so we're gonna have to do something.
However, that's expandable.
I disagree. Okay, so if I'm just a minority vote in this, that's fine, but I'm just simply saying, I'd like to see what the community members in Rogers and Otsego say about it, because I don't think it's just one way or the other. I think there's a lot that feel passionate that they are part of Rogers and they believe in it, and there's a lot that want community school, and I would really like to see them.
Is the survey gonna identify where you live, like Rogers community, Otsego community? Or-
We would have all of them, just like the school perception one had before, right? So you would, so we would be able to see all the way from the north, all.
So when we talk about longevity for 1 and 2, I don't see one ever needing additions and capacity. One is a permanent solution in my mind, because again, we're only talking in the south. We're at 55-65% capacity at some of the schools in the north. We haven't even talked about that. So, and that's why I asked that question. If we did 2, it shows that we're at capacity in 10 years, even with the smaller high school. But as you approach 10 years, you could shift kids, because what we're showing 10 years is Elk River's declining, Zimmerman's staying the same. So when we looked at redistricting, Otsego and Rogers are growing so much that they're gonna put us, if we just redistrict at 10 years, every school in the district is gonna be at 120% capacity. We could do it, but it'd be very painful, right? So we do have that capacity in the middle of the north that we could send kids to. And we totally disregarded that when we built this. So even at building a high school, if in 10 years, that high school is getting full, we should have room in Elk River, Zimmerman, to send a few kids if we need to.
I think if we're gonna do community schools and you're gonna tell Otsego residents that their kids are gonna go to Elk River, I think that's gonna be a struggle. If we're gonna do community schools and then say that in 10 years. I think by doing a community school, we're going to have to continue to monitor and watch it and add on. If you live in Rogers, you're gonna wanna stay in Rogers schools. If you live in Otsego, you're gonna wanna stay in Otsego schools.
I guess that's for a future board to see, but for me, it's using current capacity before we put the taxpayers.
Just a reminder, we're not, obviously not deciding which program to move forward. We're talking about a survey.
We're still trying to get the survey.
I know that you got it. We're trying to craft a survey that leads the community to give us input on how they feel about it. So to me, I actually think you should ask about your Rogers edition. I do, because I think you're gonna wanna gauge what the community feels about this. When you look at the southern end of the district, if we don't know how they feel about an addition versus a new high school, what you risk in a referendum is putting Rogers versus Otsego. And I think you have to be really careful. There's a lot of voters there that if you put the two against each other because you didn't ask them, I think there's a risk. And so I really do think that you should ask that question about the Rogers edition.
If we ask all 3, what would it look like? Is that going to dilute it too much?
Well, we would probably still ask 2, but we would say on one of the options, do you want to go big high school like Rogers in Elk River, or are you more comfortable with the tax tolerance of the
But if you're asking tax tolerance for $100,000, where are you gonna go up to, all the way to 700,000, 800,000, million? And if a whole bunch of them come back at that, then we would know until the.
Yeah, no, it's just up to the 3.
No, I'm asking value of the home.
Oh,
Right.
I don't remember where it stopped.
So I guess that would give us the idea of how big we could go, right, the tax tolerance.
So, one more question. Proposal 2 and proposal 3 are gonna be listed at the same price. Is that what we were saying?
Approximately. I
So that
mean.
people aren't choosing number 3 just because of the price tag. So let's list them as the same price, because they're gonna even out. Yeah.
If we do that, why would we not sell one of those lots we just bought in Otsego?
I think that's a conversation to have in the future if the addition on Rogers High School comes up. I do I would probably recommend against that, though, just for the future, because you have to understand how far this district is going to go. And if you have a parcel that was bought specifically because housing developments are coming around, it would be a big risk to say, now we no longer have it, right? Because if you need it in the future, those properties are only going to appreciate and be a good investment for the school district in the long term. So I'd be really cautious about selling those right away, if that is an issue.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, growth in that Seagull would slow down, that's what I think.
There's a lot of south, like in the southwestern part of the district, a lot of folks go over STMA. So that could come back. And that's a variable we don't know about.
So do we have clear direction of the superintendent?
Yeah.
I think I have what I need.
1, 2,
The
and 3.
majority of the board wants 1, 2, and 3 on the survey.
I'm good with that.
Yes, sir.
I'll still say no, but that's my opinion.
I think it's, like as Shane said, asking the voters what their thoughts are, just so it's, everybody knows that was a consideration.
All right, we'll be going.
Thank you, Stanger. Thank you, everybody that put this stuff together. Very good information. We appreciate it all. Thank you, Jody.